Hey, patrons. Thank you so much for your support. Certainly do appreciate it. I wanted to get this video out to you. I was going to do it yesterday, but I decided to kind of give the review some time before I get this video, knocked out. But the purpose of this video is to kind of just follow up with just a couple more things about the Sapphires. I was like, which side did I put these on? About the Sapphires that I think you'd want to know. And it also gave me some time to kind of think about, is there anything that I missed? And it turns out, yeah, I missed a couple of things that I wish I would have remembered to include in the review, so I'm going to mention them now. I obviously made it a big point with the Sapphires to talk about the M100 being crossoverless. That doesn't mean that these woofers are playing without a crossover. It's essentially a 2.5 way. This guy is on a second order slope at 575 hertz. And then the bottom woofer down there is on another second order slope, which is at 90 hertz. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear about this point is no crossover, second order. Got it. The next thing that I wanted to mention that I wish I would have celebrated this in the review is having reviewed the older M3s and then reviewing these, the evolution of spatial audio is incredible. And what I'm talking about specifically is, if you flip these guys around, and you can see this in the review, I'm sure a lot of you guys notice this, is there's no wires like going from the tweeter to the woofers. It's not cheesy looking. Everything is routed inside the actual baffle, which is so clean. And even down to the connection down to the crossover, it's got one of those new trick, locks that you just plug in, lock in place, and you're done. It just speaks to the fact that Clayton is really good at this. He's really good at evolving a product and giving us something that feels very much complete. In no way, shape, or form does this feel like kind of thrown together. It's the details are hard to miss because the details are so simple, but then when you look at it, you're like, wow, this is genius. How he did a great job. All right. The next thing that I wanted to mention, and I don't know if this is amateur hour, but I didn't talk about soundstage with the Sapphires. Well, there was a comment this morning where it's like, what about soundstage? And I was like, it's in there, right? I talked about soundstage, right? And I didn't, which is insane. It's completely crazy. They stage really, really well. You can get the Sapphires to disappear. One important thing, it's going to be based on your room. And I'm fortunate to have a room that I can get these things way out into the room. And when I do, I can get these to totally let go and disappear. I know there was a comment on YouTube, and I've even gotten an email saying, hey, I'm having a hard time getting the Sapphires they already bought to disappear. Look, this could just come down to your room. And, it's hard to predict how things are going to work in every single situation. Some of you guys have rooms where, like, I saw a picture of a room with a guy with Sapphires, and it's like a bedroom, and you can't expect really any speaker to disappear in a room like that. It's going to be very challenging to do. So, to make a long story short, you can get these to disappear, and they image extremely well. And yes, you can get that disappearing act, but your room is going to be a big part of that equation. So I can only tell you in the context of my environment, and my room is, 16 feet wide, it's 20 feet deep, and that allows me to pull them way away from the walls. And in that situation, these, I can totally get them to vanish and disappear. So I want to talk about pairings. Now that we've kind of established, some of the things that I didn't mention in the review, I want to move on to pairings. The first thing that I want to celebrate is going to be the little NADM10 little black box. And man, that NADM10 with the Sapphires is really like a one and done solution for so many reasons. First and foremost, it is Class D, and it sounds to me as good as Class D has sounded. I mean, we're getting to a point with Class D that I think that we're really pushing the envelope of how good Class D can sound. I know that it's using some in-core technology for the amp modules inside the NADM10. I don't know exactly what they're using, but it sounds really freaking good. And not once with the NADM10 do I find that the top end or upper mid-range is starting to sound dry or chalky or reminiscent of older Class D stuff. I think it sounds fantastic. On top of that, there's enough muscle power to do some impressive things with bass. So you have that going for it. But the real secret of the NADM10, and the reason why I think it's a fantastic pairing, is that it has built-in Dirac. And room correction is not something that I would say is like, it's not something that I want to celebrate on this channel to the point where you think that that's what it's all about, because I think that anytime you can put up panels and tackle acoustic treatment in a natural way is the way that you should do it. But if you can't, right? Or if you're in a situation kind of like what we were talking about before, in a room that is just problematic and no amount of acoustic treatment is going to fix it, then things like Dirac is really useful. And so when I use the NADM10 with these, it gives me quite a bit more flexibility of where I can place the Sapphires and I always end up with a bit of a rise right around 50 hertz. With the NADM10, I can clean that up. So if I have a room mode issue that you start seeing a peak or a rise, you can knock that out with Dirac. And what's cool about it is you can then set up a curtain where you're only affecting the lower frequencies and leaving everything else alone works to your benefit. So you're not missing out on spatial cues and all of the things as to why I don't want to celebrate room correction as the end all be all way to do things. I don't think that's true. And it seems like the higher you get in frequencies, that's where room correction, quite frankly, sucks. It's not there yet. It makes a mess the higher you go. So the fact that you can target lower frequencies and fix room mode issues with Dirac and the NADM10 made it one of my favorite pairings with the Sapphires. The second that I would say is for those that are willing to sacrifice some of those features, some of that feature set, and you just want a killer sounding rig without breaking the bank, you guys already know what I'm going to say. The shit audio stack that we featured in the rig versus rig videos that we did with the Sapphires, unbelievable value. Freya Plus, tubes engaged, Bifrost 2, a pair of Voyagers, fully balanced. Yeah, that combo is so good, and the value proposition is so high that it's hard not to just celebrate that as one of the best ways to go with the Sapphires. I will say this, and I need to say this, I have had no problems running the Voyagers mono into the Sapphires at all. No problems at all. But there have been a couple of guys out there that seem to know what the heck they're talking about when it comes to the Voyagers being bridged and the load that they're actually seeing with the Sapphires being less than 4 ohms. And it seems like they're concerned that while I'm not running into any issues right now, it might take its toll on the amplifiers over the long haul. I don't know if that's true. It sounds like it might be true. You might run into some problems down the road. So I would say this, email Shit Audio, talk to them. If you want to use my impedance sweep that I have on the Sapphires, you are welcome to it. Just let me know and see what they say. I'm curious, if they would be like, nah, you're going to be fine. No problems, no issues. Because the last thing I want to do is recommend gear that might end up voiding a warranty or giving you problems down the road. In any event, that rig with the Sapphires is mind-blowing good, especially when we're talking about some of the bass dynamics and slam down below. Those agers can wake up these Sapphires like nobody's business. All right, let's tackle these babies back here. Let's get this part right. These are both genuine, in my opinion, genuine, and I never have used this term. They're giant slayers. These are actual, real, legitimate giant killers. And a big part of that is the fact that Danny and Clayton, they already know open baffle is where it's at. They already know it. And I know it because I've heard it. And so there is this grassroots effort that is happening right now to let's start the revolution of talking about open baffle, because you guys are missing out on so many amazing things that open baffle brings to the table. And these guys share so much, they have so much in common that are positive attributes that when we start talking about some of the key differences between these two, I think that a lot of the things that I would rather spend my time talking about is going to come down to lifestyle differences. I don't think that somebody that's going to be picking up the Sapphires are even interested in the Atticas. And I think for somebody that's interested in the Atticas, they might look at the Sapphires and say, why would I get those when I can just build the Atticas? And so let's walk through some of the logistical things that you must understand before we talk about, some of the key differences on how these sound. Before I do that, the Sapphires versus any other speaker that I've ever reviewed up to the Atticas, it slays them. The Sapphires are a one-and-done solution. They feel like a speaker from the future because they're so dang clean. You plop them down, you plug them in, and you're ready to rock and roll. So I think with that statement alone, I've already helped a lot of you guys understand, okay, that sounds appealing. I don't want to mess with building a speaker. I don't want to mess with do-it-yourself. I just want a speaker that is complete and ready to go. It's a lifestyle thing, right? So we'll get to some of the differences on how they sound, but already I think it's important to understand you got to ask the right question before we tackle, well, what about the sonic differences? With these guys, the Atticas, which these are an amazing freaking speaker. They really are. They do so many amazing things. You have to build these. You have to make these. These show up to your doorstep in pieces. Lots of pieces. You gotta do all this. And I did all this. And it was a lot of work. It was like 2 weeks just to get the cabinets built, from beginning to end. And going back and thinking about all those long nights of putting the panels together, the flat packs together, and then getting to that scary moment of actually gluing everything together, man. That was terrifying to do that. And some of you guys, it's no big deal because you've done do-it-yourself, and that's not that, that difficult for you. But for me, it was a challenge. And the veneer and the paint and all of that stuff, you're doing all of it. This shows up in pieces. This shows up complete. You're ready to go. It's more about lifestyle than anything. With the Atticas versus the Sapphires, we're already asking the wrong question, and I'll tell you why. Sapphires drop off. They play confident down to 28 hertz in my room. You can't do that with the Atticas. Not going to happen. These drop off like a rock at 50 hertz in my room. So would I rather just plug these in and listen to these versus just these? Yes, I would, because I'm getting so much more out of these speakers than I am with these. So then, guess what? That leads into the direction of you're not only investing in the Atticas, which are a great value proposition, but now you are adding on the price of subs. And you know what I'm going to say. No, I'm not talking about some cheesy sub that you get on Craigslist for $100. That's not going to cut it. Don't do that. It would be completely insane. You got to get the open baffle subs. I have the duals, so tack on another $2,000, somewhere around there for the duals. Again, you have to build them yourself from start to finish. And on top of that, you have to learn all the functionality of the plate amplifier. And on top of that, and I think this is important, and I'm not going to ignore it, and Danny's going to respect me for saying this because it sets up realistic expectations for you guys. After you set up the Atticas and the subs and the plate amps, you have like quite a bit of mess going on in your listening room. And so if you're like me, where I listen in the living room, in my season in life, that doesn't work. Every single time I set up speakers, at the end of the day, I have to move them somewhere. Otherwise, Elliot, that boy will make a quick mess out of these things. He'll be like pulling out, hey, Sonic caps. Ooh, hey, this looks delicious. And they'll be chewing on cords and all that kind of stuff. So when you set up the Atticas and the subs, plate amps, you've got a whole lot of things in your listening room. So for you guys, again, getting back to like general lifestyle, if you have a room where you can have all that stuff out and laying around and you're willing to learn all the functionalities of the subs and everything involved in that, and you're willing to build all of it, well, now we have kind of an even fight on our hands, because now we have the Atticas with subs that are augmenting, the low end. They play flat down into the teens. So they have the Sapphires beat in terms of the lowest extension for sure. And they do have the Sapphires beat in terms of how you can manipulate the bottom end. And what I mean by that is you can plop those subs down and then dial in what you need that sub to be doing in their current location. To a certain degree, I mean, it can't work miracles, but you get the idea. That meaning, if you have some issues in that particular location, with the plate amp, you can adjust it to tweak it to where it's good. With the Sapphires, they're passive. So you have to work with the room to get the best performance out of the Sapphires. And if you just plop them down and you have a bass mode issue or whatever the problem is in that particular location, there's going to be some give and take there. Where with the Atticas and the subs and the plate amps, it's mad scientist time. You can dial some of those problems out, or you can, you guys get the idea. Lifestyle, I think, is going to dictate which one is the better bet. They're both giant killers. They're both giant slayers as far as I'm concerned. This is where we're getting into the really good stuff. And when it comes down to how these sound, it's actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be sweating bullets when it came down to describing, oh man, am I going to offend either Clayton or Danny when we start talking about these two? I don't think so. This guy is not open baffle in the back. This guy is. So there's going to be some pros and cons that we got to discuss. With the Atticas, in terms of their decay structure, so we start talking about the natural decay of reverb hits, things like that, splashy cymbals, things of that nature, because we have stuff being played forward into the room and back into the room, there are times where I feel as if that sounds a little bit more true to life, a little bit more open, if you will, and it should based on its design. But there's no free lunch here, folks. It does come with the consequence of addressing the acoustics in the room. Because we are now playing, frequencies forward and frequencies backwards, you better make sure that you have some diffusion behind these speakers. As we move down, and I'll say this, let's talk about the tone of these two. I think that the M100 Sapphire Tweeter, both of these start with neutral. Let's get that part right. Neutral, natural sounding. At no point do I find with either of these tweeters that Clayton or Danny is playing this ridiculous game of how do I tilt the top end to make it sound like these are a little bit more detailed than what they should be. Neither of them are playing that game. So kudos to both of these guys. Both of these tweeters, in my opinion, start with a very natural presentation. Now, different materials, right? Different technologies in the tweeters, one being completely open baffle as well. I think that if this is dead nuts neutral, the Atticas top end slightly tilts to being a little bit more detail centric, a little bit more quick to respond with micro dynamics, micro details, like the craziest edge of like I I can hear this woman as she steps up to the mic. I can hear her part her lips as she sings. Like that type of level of like what crazy analytical details, but yet it's not doing it in a way that doesn't sound natural. Meaning it's just part of the presentation. It's a little bit more detail centric. With the Sapphires, equally as impressive, but I think that it moves a little bit in the direction of smooth. It's like, hey man, you want to listen to some Katy Perry? You want to listen to some, top 40 hits? Or I don't listen to Katy Perry. I promise I don't. I don't know why I even said that. But you get the idea. You want to listen to just some stuff that is popular music? It just has the slightest edge of forgiveness to where you can get away with more music with these than I think you can with these, because these, they're just not going to let it pass. And in that particular recording, if there is some not so pretty stuff, the Atticas are going to say, hey man, sorry, I'm going to deliver the not so pretty stuff in a very natural way, but it's still not so pretty stuff. Or with the Sapphires and the M100s, I think it's just riding that line of saying, I'm going to just curve that just a little bit so you can listen to Katy Perry. I don't know why I keep bringing up Katy Perry. It's weird. All right. So that covers that. All right. So I want to talk about mid-range, and this is going to be a celebration in both camps for two different reasons. First and foremost, we have this big wide baffle, and on top of that, we have a big honkin' 15-inch driver. And I made point of this in the review, and I'll make point of it again. When you see it, what you hear is hard to believe. It's like, how does that sound so natural? How does that sound so quick? How does that sound so real when you're looking at a big 15-inch driver and you're expecting like some extra bloom or some extra bass thrown into the vocals that doesn't quite sound right? It doesn't happen with these speakers. And so this is a celebration of their design, that we have a big wide baffle, we have a big honkin' 15-inch driver, and then we have, obviously the Uniwave playing down to 600 hertz, but in the heart of mid-band, right, we're talking like 200, 300, 400 hertz, as low as 100 hertz. All of that stuff down there, it's being played from that woofer predominantly. I mean, you're hearing it being played from a 15-inch woofer on a big wide baffle, and it doesn't sound like everybody's mouths are the size of footballs. It actually sounds clean, and it sounds accurate, and it sounds realistic. It sounds true to life and quick to respond. So huge celebration on the mid-band with these guys. With these, you see Danny using these wings that Danny's always talking about on his channel. We got one big long wing on one side and a smaller short wing on the other side. And so you have this asymmetrical design, for the wings. And when you look at it, you're thinking, oh, I know what the mid-range is going to sound like on these. It's going to sound something like this, because you've got, it's open in the back and it's going to be bouncing off weird angles and it just doesn't seem like it's going to sound natural. And yet, like we experienced with the Sapphires with their design, we experienced the same thing with the Atticas. When I first heard the Atticas, that was the first thing that floored me, is it doesn't sound like this. It sounds so realistic and lifelike. So Danny has mastered what he does with his use of the wings, and the mid-range sounds clean, precise. It almost sounds like I'm describing the same speaker, and I'm not, but what I am describing is they tackled mid-range in two totally different ways, but the results lead me to believe that both knew what the heck they were doing when they designed their two speakers And what we ended up with is a very natural presentation in all things midband. Now, going back to, there's got to be a difference, right? It's like, Ron, come on, man. Just take the gloves off, say it like it is. There's got to be a key difference in how they sound, and there is. Going back to what I had to say about the top end, the Atticas being a little bit shifted to being a little bit more detail-centric, with the Sapphires being a little bit more on the smooth side. It's the same thing. The same tone that we're talking about on top trickles down into the midband. And what I find with these guys, even though they are impossibly detailed, like I gave the analogy of being out in nature in the review, impossibly detailed, I do think that you can get away with some less than stellar recordings because there seems to be just an edge of forgiveness with the midband on these. And with these guys, nope. It's like, hey, you gave me a not so perfect recording, and that's what you're going to hear. So I think that the Atticas are just going to ride that line of being slightly more detail driven, with the Sapphires being slightly smoother. So, and man, I got to say, I'm cutting hairs. I mean, we're talking very, very small differences. Even when you listen to these like side by side and you just shift back and forth, you're sitting there going, well, gosh, man, I just keep coming back to the fact that both of these sound freaking awesome. And that's it. Like, that's the period at the end of the sentence. So all of these small little changes that I'm talking about, it's tough, man. Because both Danny and Clayton did a fantastic job on both of these speakers. So I would say this, slight advantage if what you're after is ultimate detail, Atticas. Slight advantage if you want things just to be slightly smooth, just ever so polished. I think the Sapphires, they take the lead in that category. I am now going to probably say the most crazy thing. And this is where, oh man, Danny's probably going to call me and be like, hey man, you feeling okay? Did your ears stop working on you? Because I'm about to say something that it's going to be a surprise. And it's going to be a surprise to a lot of you dudes. But I'm going to say it because I report what I hear. Bass with the direct servo subs in the Atticas versus the Sapphires. I think after a lot of time processing and thinking, going back and listening again to make sure, like, Ron, if you're going to make a statement like this, you better be right. I think I'm right. I think the Sapphires are faster sounding with bass than the direct servo subs. I do. I have gone back and forth so many times listening. They're both fast. I mean, it's like we got two supercars, right? They're both fast. But man, I just keep hearing a level of speed in the Sapphires that I think it's actually a bit quicker than the direct servo subs. So if this was live, Danny would be like, Ron, we got what? I got to hear those things now. That's what I respect about Danny. People like, I got to hear these things now. I think that's exactly what he'd say. Like, what the heck is going on? But texture and tone is even Steven. It's a fair fight. Honestly, it's a fair fight. I think that the fact that we both have like-minded designers in terms of texture and tone, the king of that is Papercone. Papercone drivers in the Sapphires. We have Papercone drivers in Danny's camp with the Atticas. It's an even. I would hate to be the guy that declares a winner in that fight because, man, you better be paying close attention. I think that they're both world class bass out of the Sapphires. World class bass, texture and tone. out of the direct servo subs. No doubt about that. So yeah, when it comes to all things bass, we got a good fight on our hands. I am not going to take back what I just said. It's crazy, I know, but I think the Sapphires, they might be the fastest bass around that I've heard. They're so quick. It's crazy. So, yeah, those are the differences. Those are the key differences between these two. I hope this helps. I hope that everything that I had to say about the lifestyle differences being the biggest determining factor between these two, I think that that's what you really should be thinking about is what do I want my listening room to look like and feel like? Do I have the ability to build speakers, or do I want a one and done solution? I think that's going to be the biggest determining factor. And when we get down to how they sound, we got some giant slayers on our hands, and both of these are so good. I can promise, I'll say it like this. I could drop these off at Danny's house, and I could drop these off at Clayton's house, and they would both call me in the morning saying, man, I stayed up really late listening to music last night because those speakers are really good. That's what they would say. There's no doubt in my mind. They would both say, open baffle rules, and here we have two examples as to why. So, that's that. Questions, comments down below. I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys in the next video.